joining us right now to discuss the latest developments in the Boston Marathon case is Newsmax legal analyst Michelle Suskauer, also a criminal defense attorney. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, so before we talk about Joe Carr, I want to talk about this other case, the accomplice, a little bit. He's on trial, and there's been new security video released showing those two in a dorm room the day after the bombing. Obviously, a young man here. You know, when you talk about accomplices here, what is the litmus test to determine whether or not somebody is really an accomplice involved in a crime like this?
Well, you know, you can't just be judged by the company you keep. There actually has to be some overt or affirmative action, or some evidence that shows that you helped in some sort of a conspiracy or helped do something that in the act to make it move forward. And so again, what did he do? Did he help get any sort of supplies? Did he go with him? Did he help pack backpacks? Did he help prepare bombs? So what did he do other than just be with him, just be a roommate, or just be, you know, his friend?
Okay, so just appearing on video with a suspect does not make you necessarily an accomplice.
No, I mean, it certainly doesn't help, especially in Boston, and we're going to be talking about a change of venue. But again, you can't just be judged just by the company you keep. Okay,
one more question on this case here. The closing argument starting today. Does the verdict in this case have any bearing on Joe Carr's future case?
Oh, well, how could you? It's even though they're individuals, but yeah, how can you not separate them? But I think that what that does for Joe Carr's attorneys is say, look, clearly here, this really isn't the right venue for this type of case, because what has happened last month, just jumping to sort of the next point, is that there was a motion to change venue from federal court in Massachusetts, in Boston, to federal court in Washington, D.C. And what his lawyers have said is there is just an overwhelming presumption of guilt, that there is no way that he could get a fair trial and have a jury pool that has not already been tainted by significant pretrial publicity. So what they've done is they've hired experts, they've done a poll, and it showed that well over 50% of the potential veneer, the potential jury pool, has already made a decision as to guilt, because so many individuals either were in the marathon or attended the marathon or watched the marathon on TV, even more so than the McVeigh situation in Oklahoma City.
We do live in a much different time now than when the McVeigh trial occurred, because we have social media now, and you have the ability to read things on Twitter or on Newsmax.com or any other number of websites. So does the argument still hold up? Because what people learn and the feelings they have in Boston could be shared by folks who might have the same feelings and have read the same stories, including the issue of the so-called the confession letter. They know about this stuff in Washington, D.C. as well.
There's no question. I mean, we know it worldwide, and certainly the proliferation of social media and the information that goes out 24/7, nonstop at your fingertips, certainly that is a very good argument. However, what they've done is they actually polled folks in Washington, D.C., and the familiarity with this, the case and all the specifics, were significantly less. They didn't just pull that out of a hat. But what they've asked the court to do recently is to actually give them a little bit more time so they could actually bring experts in to talk about the veracity of their polling, to talk about this overwhelming presumption of guilt. And of course, the government is saying there's no way, this is skewed, and they're of course going to oppose it, although they haven't filed any documentation to that effect.
Interesting there. Now, when you look at these types of trials here, does this give us any indication as to whether or not there could be any plea deal here? I mean, it would seem to me, as someone who doesn't practice law, that if they're arguing for a change of venue, they plan to fight these charges as much as they possibly can.
I just can't see. Listen, there can always be a potential resolution, but there wouldn't really be a plea deal in federal court. The sentencing is always up to the judge and in federal court, regardless of what the parties may want to do. But in this particular case, they're seeking the death penalty. So no. I can't see it happening.
Even not a plea to avoid the death penalty.
And that could very well be. It could happen where he would just get life in prison. This is such a high-profile case. At this point in time, I think what they need to do, if the defense is doing what they're doing, which is trying to move this case out of Boston.
Now, of course, because of the terrorism tie-in here, this is also a politically charged case as well. Deval Patrick, the governor of Massachusetts, he's restrained his condemnation of the bombers somewhat. Now, some could argue that and I think you would argue that someone of Deval Patrick's caliber and his level of office should not be making comments. Still, he's getting criticism for not weighing in a little bit more firm on this issue.
You know, we still have a presumption of innocence in this country.
Do we?
And yes, well, I hope we do, because it protects all of us. And so he is in a very difficult situation, but again, he's the governor of the state. And it is tough, but he's part of even though this is in federal court, he's part of the mechanism. People look to him. And so he's really in a no-win situation, because if he comes out too strong, then again, he's saying, well, he's already sort of helping the defense and having this case moved out of his jurisdiction. But if he doesn't come out strong enough, people obviously already have condemned him. So he's in a very, very precarious situation, and he's probably doing the best that he can.
We do have one soundbite I want to play for you real quickly,
Sure.
and we'll get your reaction on the other side. So let's go ahead and play that clip real quick.
It was a terrorist act against us and our country, and especially our city, and I think that it should be here.
There you have a survivor saying that he wants this trial in his city. Does that type of emotion play into the decision that's going to be made here as to whether or not this trial is held in Boston or Washington, D.C.?
Well, I do. Well, that's the argument that the defense is going to make, is that you have these survivors here, and certainly.
But the counter argument that they deserve to see justice play out in their.
But justice will play out wherever it is. Whether it's in federal court in D.C., and that this is the defense argument, or federal court in Massachusetts. But he must get a fair trial. If he is convicted, he is convicted.
So in other words, the rights of the victims to not have to travel to Washington, D.C. to see this trial is not overwhelming enough.
But it is. But I'll tell you, John, just because that has happened, that does not mean that they are not going to get justice.
All right, fair enough, and we'll see what happens in the courts. Another case I want to talk about too, when we talk about the presumption of innocence in this country, is Bowe Bergdahl.
Yes.
He has now reportedly hired an attorney who has a track record in dealing with these types of cases, military law here. But earlier we played a soundbite from the Pentagon spokesman, John Kirby, Rear Admiral John Kirby, and you could tell he was almost angry at the question as to why Bowe Bergdahl is not under more severe or more restrictive supervision. And I just want to get your take on a lot of the public sentiment out there right now on Bowe Bergdahl.
Well, gosh, I mean, the public sentiment, and people feel so strongly about this. But the fact of the matter is now he is being reintegrated back into the Army, and people are wondering, well, why hasn't he been discharged? If he gets discharged, then they're going to lose jurisdiction over him if they want to eventually have a court-martial. And so at this point, he has not been questioned. He is under scrutiny, and he has retained a civilian attorney, actually a professor of military justice from Yale University, because he will be questioned. This is not over. And I think people are concerned that this is just going to be done because he's being reintegrated. It's not done. It's not finished.
Now, I know you are not Bowe Bergdahl's attorney, but if you were treating someone or working with somebody, representing somebody in a similar situation here, we know charges have not been filed yet. But based on what you heard, would you be preparing for the eventuality that charges are going to be filed? I mean, we've had some of his platoon mates on this very program saying, no question about it, he walked away, he deserted us.
I think that that the sergeant has done the exact right thing in retaining counsel, because it's coming. The storm is coming in terms of his questioning and potential charges against him. So they're doing what they need to do in reintegrating him. As I said before, they cannot discharge him, or else he's not going to be coming back involuntarily, and it needs to play out. But I think that the sergeant sees the writing on the wall, which is why he went ahead and retained civilian counsel here.
Okay, now obviously one more question in about 30 seconds remain here. Different type of trial, international in scope. Can Bowe Bergdahl get a fair trial, a fair military trial?
we hope that he can get a fair trial. But again, that is a completely different situation, different set of facts, and the way that he is going to be judged by his own peers.
And we will see what plays out with the Bowe Bergdahl case. But Michelle Suskauer, legal analyst for us, great to have you here as always. A couple more topics we'd like to discuss with you, so we'll have you back as soon as we possibly can.
Sure, thank you.
My pleasure. More to come here on America's Forum. Of course, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Can Dzhokhar Tsarnaev or Bowe Bergdahl get a fair trial anywhere in this country? Reach out to us on social media. See the call out on the screen there. We'll be back with more here on America's Forum in a few minutes.